You were in love with the woman with the same name, and now you're married to a woman with the same name.
When I came to India was another Parveen in Kabir's life.
Women marry men because they think they will change, and they don't. Men
Yeah,
marry women thinking they won't change, and they do.
and they do.
Yes, she paid for part of my sister's education when she came to Miranda House after finishing her school.
Hmm.
And Indira Gandhi is very kind.
What have you learned about mental health now that two key people in your life have suffered from schizophrenia? And how did that change you as a person for the rest of your life?
A mental health problem is that the person who's afflicted does not want to admit it. That's the
Hmm.
first barrier you have to cross. So, what it takes to convince that person.
For generations, women were told it's all about big eyes and long hair and how docile and submissive you are and how adaptable and flexible you are and how much are you able to kind of bend backwards to please your man, things like that. But when you grow up and you actually start interacting with your colleagues and other male members of your fraternity or your universe, they tell you you have always been lied to. This was never the truth.
Fall in love with a woman, all those critical faculties seem to go out the window. And
Yeah.
suddenly he's married for all the wrong reasons and he wonders why. So, and then the woman equally pays the price. So,
Yeah.
two decisions, who you marry and how you make your living, you
Mhm.
get those right, most of your problems in life are sorted. Or not sorted, at least they're minimized. And make those two wrong decisions, you'll have a rocky, tumultuous ride.
Hi and welcome. Somebody very famously said, fill your life with experiences, not things, and have stories to tell, not things to show. And I think one man who completely personifies this quote, this life hack, is Mr. Kabir Bedi. I'm going to be in conversation with him. I think my mother had a crush on him, then I had a crush on him. He's this unique man who's seen it all. And so many generations in one family have kind of liked him, loved him, watched him over these years. And it's a pleasure and honor to be in conversation with you, Mr. Bedi. Hi.
Hi, Atika. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm so delighted to be chatting to you and nice to know that I'm appreciated by your family. It's always nice to be appreciated. That's what we work for. That's what we hope for. Lovely seeing you, and I look forward to a great chat.
Thank you. So, there are two kinds of women in India. One that like Rajesh Khanna and Amitabh Bachchan, and the others who like James Bond and James Dean and Sean Connery, and the men like you. So I guess you are the urban woman's crush always, the quintessential Delhi Bombay woman who was a liberated woman. All these women had a crush on men like you. And I think you were the man who they kind of aspired to be with. But you would always go away to Europe and Canada and America. Why so?
It's just been my, I won't say destiny because I believe we make our own destiny, but it's been the course of my life to constantly be on the move,
Yes.
moving from Delhi to Bombay, Bombay to Rome, Rome to London, London to Hollywood. I spent
Mm.
almost 30 years of my life outside India,
Just
building a
that.
career, being the first Indian actor to go from Bollywood and make a career in
Yeah.
Hollywood with lots of glory in Europe along the way.
Yeah.
And that's been my journey, really.
Oh, yes. You are the
That's
urban
been that's
vanilla.
been that's been that's been the arc of my journey. My journey, of course, is a far more complex inner world, which
Yes.
is what I've shared because I call my book "The Emotional Journey of an Actor,"
Yes.
and that's what my book is all about: the emotional part of being who I
Yes.
am, living the life I led, seeing
Mm.
the successes that I saw, suffering the losses that I endured, loving the women I did, losing some great people along the way.
Mm.
It's what it takes to be human. You know, the whole journey, the joys, sorrows, exhilaration, wonder, uh, and um,
Yeah.
and the sorrows of being human.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, no, I read your book. One second, let me get your book. Let's
I
not do this without
I have
this.
it here. I have it here.
Let's raise a
Stories I
toast
must
to this.
tell.
3 cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for holding that
Stories
up.
I must tell. Great. So, I read this entire book, sir, and I must say that I was quite overwhelmed. मैं कई लोगों से जिंदगी में मिली हूँ, मुझे लगता है मेरी अपनी भी कहानी कुछ ऐसी है, and I have met a lot of men and women who've had a tumultuous life, you know, full of ups and downs, and it takes nerves of steel to surpass and bear and overcome these constant highs and lows. The physical transformation of a person, and the travel that he does in life, and then the mental travel that he does, and then the spiritual travel that he does. There is a concept in psychology that says a person has three ages. One is a physical age, one is a spiritual age, and one is a psychological age. So sometimes a 60-year-old may be feeling like a 20-year-old. A 25-year-old might be thinking like a 75-year-old. So in that way, I thought you have had quite a journey, and despite all of this encompassed in this one book, you are there smiling, and still a very relevant actor, desirable actor in the news out there. Tell me that personality trait of yours that has enabled you to still be alive and kicking and happy and strong after all this that I read here.
My journey has been one that is filled with all the drama of life, as you read in my book. I must say that I was very blessed to have some remarkable parents. And what they taught me and what I learned from their example gave me a lot of strength. But there was a period in my life when I followed my mother's interest into Buddhism. And I went to Rangoon and became a Buddhist monk and shaved my hair and wore orange robes and walked on the streets with a lacquer begging bowl of the Buddhist monks in a file of monks getting food in the morning, meditating in the day. But I think those experiences have stayed with me and given me the strength to deal with a lot of ups and downs, because you need inner strength to deal with the ecstasy of life as well, apart from the agony of life. Both are part of life, and both have been very much a part of my life. And my journey has been one of continuous reinvention, reinventing myself from being a radio employee in Delhi to...
No, wait. No, I have to interrupt you here, sir. So I have 25 points that I've got in my mind on which I want to talk to you about. And for the love of clarity, for everybody who's watching this, let me start in not a linear fashion, but I want to touch upon the major points of anyone's life. That is the mother, the marital relationships, the career, and various things. Let me first start with your mother. Your mother was this unique woman. You were born in Lahore, but your mother was not Indian. She was an NRI in those times, a British woman who actually lived in India and fought for Indian freedom struggle. And she was a supporter of Indian nationalism. And she even was Mahatma Gandhi's protege and spent time with her. And imagine being born to a Gandhian Brit woman and born in Lahore. How was that, and what's her influence on you?
Both my parents were part of an age of idealism. It was a time when the whole country had a junoon, that they wanted to be free. And they were part of it. And they gave up so much in life to be part of it. And gladly, even though it meant they had no money, they had to, we literally lived in huts in Lahore. No electricity, no running water, 3 jhonpadis out there with a buffalo tethered nearby for milk. And that's what I was born into. So I wasn't there during the whole freedom struggle days, but I certainly was aware from the tales my family told me of all these leftists and freedom fighters that would gather in the huts to be watched by the police and harassed and beat. People like Gyani Zail Singh, who became president, Indra Kumar Gujral, who became prime minister, Sheikh Abdullah, who became the ruler of Kashmir, Hafiz Jalandhari, who became the poet laureate of Pakistan, Satish Gujral, all these young idealistic rebels gathered, and that was the spirit of the age. So my mother was pretty much a part of that, and gladly stood by my father's side.
Her name, that's her name, Freda Bedi, right?
Freda Bedi,
Freda Bedi,
yeah. And she became very much willingly a part of his life. In fact, when he proposed to her in Oxford, he said, I can't promise you any security. You probably have to wait outside jails for me. And that's what she did. She went to jail herself. She had to wait outside jails for him. And that was their life. And then I won't go into the whole Kashmir chapter of their life because that's again a complicated chapter, but how they transitioned from being revolutionaries to becoming major religious figures, with my mother discovering Buddhism and then becoming the highest ranked Buddhist man in the world, how my father, for
Right.
all his Sikh roots and adoration of Guru Nanak, on whom he wrote books, becoming a big New Age guru in Italy. And what it takes to live through that and watch their transformations, watch your parents transforming from being social workers into religious figures, is quite an extraordinary experience to live, and yet still have the feeling that they are your mother, your father, and the love from them. So I was blessed in that way. Um, when my mother actually took the step of getting ordained, when she shaved her hair off and got into maroon robes of a Tibetan Buddhist nun, I was outraged. I was angry with her because I couldn't understand how she could do this without telling me. And I was in college those days. I was maybe 20 years old and 18 years old at the time. And I said, how can you do this? And she said, who decides when an apple falls to the ground?
Wow.
Something is ripe and it just is time for it to happen. And because I'd shared so much of her journey, I saw her doing this without telling me as a betrayal. But then she wrote me this wonderfully poetic letter, which I've put in my book, where in essence she says that I protected you and your sister in your childhood. You were the children then. Now I need your protection, because I'm now part of an unbroken lineage of ordination from the Buddha, and it's an incredible sacred thing, and I need your protection. So it was so beautiful. And of course, in time, one understood that. And more than that, I carried with her all that she taught me in terms of being kind in life and considerate and tolerant.
Yeah. So your father was from Punjab, studied at Oxford. Your mother was from the Great Britain in those times, very, very colonial thing. I mean, that's exactly what we were fighting against, right? In those
She
days.
said, she said, I love England, but I hate colonialism. And I'll come and fight alongside you against colonialism. And that was the idealism that they had. And they started this printing press in Lahore, nationalist kind of newspaper. And it was really hard work. And Balraj Sani came and tried to help my father. And my father said to him, he said, listen, Balraj, if this was a literary magazine, I'd say gladly come. This, what we are doing, running a nationalist newspaper with no money, is a dog's job. And we are dogs out to be whipped by our own volition, our own choice. So please carry on, be an artist, do what you have to. Thank you for your offer. So Balraj helped them for a couple of weeks and left them. But then when I joined Bollywood, he was one of the first people to actually welcome me to Bollywood.
Okay, so by virtue of having been belonging to a family that was very, very active in the freedom struggle, you had a few contacts in the political milieu as well. Tell me, is it true that Indira Gandhi, who went on to become the Prime Minister, in fact, one of the most strong Prime Ministers of India, paid for your education, your sister's education when you were young?
Yes, she paid for part of my sister's education when she came to Miranda House after finishing her school. And Indira Gandhi was very kind. And she knew my mother because she'd seen my mother's work with refugees in Kashmir. And she'd seen what my mother had done with the Tibetan refugees in the Mizamari refugee camps when the Dalai Lama came over after fleeing Tibet in 1959 when the Chinese took over the country. So she always remained a very friendly figure. And as luck would have it, when I went to this Montessori school, called Mrs. Goba School on Haley Road near Connaught Circus in Delhi, I became good friends with Rajiv and Sanjay because they were there. Rajiv was a year older, Sanjay was a year younger. And we became good friends. And, at that time, Indira Gandhi was just the official hostess of her father, Prime Minister Nehru. So when I went to the Prime Minister's house, it was Chacha Nehru that was, as the whole country called him, the big figure. Indira Gandhi was just Auntie Indu, and Rajiv and Sanjay were just pals, and we were playing with trains and make toy cars, and I had no idea that they would have such all of them would have such a seminal influence on
Yeah.
the
On
future
the
generations in politics of India.
Who was the first girl you fell in love with?
My first big romance after I came to Bombay was with Protima, and I married her. Even though I'd sworn never to marry a model because I was at that time working in advertising, and I used to make ad films, and I didn't want models pressuring me to give them work, so I didn't want to date them. But Protima had a mind of her own, and when she set her mind to things, she generally had her way. And I've chronicled in my book very, I think with a sense of humor as well, how she set her sights on me and then set about getting me in her life. And my relationship with Protima defined me in many ways because we both grew up together. We were young, we were idealistic, we were proud of being the bohemians of the age, of pushing the boundaries. And that had its own upheavals, which I've chronicled well in my book. I can talk about it in general terms, but what it was like to go through that roller coaster relationship, I can only share in the book, which is why I wrote it.
Yeah, you're right. That's the second chapter. It says chances and choices, Kabir and Kishmish. A chance encounter can change your life, more so if it comes in the form of a beautiful woman. Even more so if you try to resist her and then succumb. So you're talking about her, right?
That's precisely what happened.
Okay. I think you were always attracted to very strong women who had a purpose in life. I was going through a couple of interviews of Ms. Protima Bedi. And in one interview she had given in England somewhere, she very famously said that I watched somebody perform dance and something happened to me. Something clicked, something shifted in me. And I said, that's the purpose of my life. And she came back. That was precisely around the same time. Well, the interview was around the same time where probably you were drifting. And she said that I had just 2 kids and a purpose of life, that was dance. So for a woman to have dance as the purpose of life, she has to be a very, very, a woman in her own, on her own feet and in her own mind to be able to think like that. I think you two were very, very strong personalities that destiny got together.
Yes. You know, Prathama had this incredible energy, and I always told her, I said, you know, if you decide to stop wasting your energy and getting into all these relationships, you can do amazing things with this energy. And when she found Odissi as a form of dance, she certainly, it just captured her, and she found her calling. And I was very happy to be able to empower that. By then, of course, our marriage had moved from being a normal marriage to becoming an open marriage. And how that process takes place, how a marriage moves from being a normal marriage to being an open marriage, I've written about in my book, and I don't want to detail that any more than that right now. But it was a huge transformatory time to live through. And it was the failure of the open marriage that led to other things.
Fine. So let's talk about your career at All India Radio. So everybody who's watching this video, I must tell you that he was once a journalist, a cover reporter who covered various events in Delhi. And one of them was interviewing the Beatles. At least that was a challenge that he had accepted. And it was not happening, but he thought, let me try it. And so it did happen. Tell me briefly about it. And we all know that journalists lie, more so these days. But you did it back then.
No, this actually happened. And it happened because I was the biggest fan of the Beatles in the world. I was freelancing with All India Radio to basically pay my college fees. And I went to them and persuaded them to allow me to interview the Beatles. And I got the tape recorder and I got the badge. And that got me into the hotel where they were staying. Then how I persuaded and pressured their manager, Brian Epstein, into granting me that interview, that's in my book. I don't want to spoil the surprise there. And what happened in that interview was also absolutely magical. Because, you know, the Beatles weren't just great musicians. They represented the whole age. They represented the 60s, which is the most exciting decade of the 20th century. It was a time when society was changing around the world. The pill had been invented. People got sexual freedom. The hippie culture was everywhere. People were talking about turning on, tuning in, dropping out. People were talking about psychedelic clothes, marching for peace for the first time in history.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, you know,
The birth of John
it was
Lennon.
the age of the Doors and Simon and Garfunkel and the Pink Floyd. These are the sounds around us. The whole counterculture movement. There was a rebellion in the air, and the Beatles symbolizes. So for me to be there in the same room with them, talking to them, was not just about the music I was talking about. It was like being with my gods of the age. And
Yeah.
it was an overwhelming experience,
Oh.
which I've described in my book. And that interview actually became a turning point for me, because All India Radio treated that so badly that it's what actually made me rethink my whole life and decide these are not the people I want to work with. I have to find my destiny elsewhere. And it's what that whole process brought me to the city, which was then called Bombay.
Bombay, actually. So that is the first chapter, and it says that leaving home with the Beatles, boldness and betrayal. I left my hometown Delhi, India's capital, because of the Beatles, the world's most popular rock band in the 1960s. It all began the day I interviewed them. And I guess, okay, so you guys have to read this book because it's a very interesting chapter, how they were going through a rough patch because of dealing with the government of a country. And then he actually used the name of our own government to twist them. It's a very
Read all about it. Read all about it. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
You have to be very quick on your feet to make the most of an opportunity.
Oh yes. So now we're moving to your Mumbai chapter. So I'm a theatre person myself, and nobody can talk of theatre and not talk about Tughlaq. When I used to do theatre, हमारे sir कहते थे, एक नाम कभी मत लेना performance से पहले. जब आप किसी play की तैयारी कर रहे हैं, performance की तैयारी कर रहे हैं, that is the word Macbeth. Never say Macbeth, because then it'll be doomed, it'll be cursed, it'll be, it's a big, it's an omen. You never take this word before preparing for a play. And we actually did take this word, and all of us, all the players, all the actors fell ill one by one. It was quite a task to put the play together. And the other word that you have to take when you're in the world of literature and theatre, that is Tughlaq. And Girish Karnad's play, Tughlaq, and the world of Ali Padamse. I have interacted very closely with Mr. Ali Padamse, and what a loss to the world of ad filmmaking. This fine man from the south, South Bombay guy. Fine man, very erudite, very polished. What do you have to tell about those times? Theatre, Ali Padamse, Girish Karnad, and your entry into theatre, and thus into films.
That's a whole chapter in my book. How can I summarize it for you in 3 words? But I was incredibly lucky that my first job in advertising was with Lintas, that my first boss was Justin Dacuna, who was the head of the agency, and Alec Padamsi was my immediate boss. How much luckier could an actor be? I mean, I'd done theatre in school and college, etc., but to be working in advertising under Alec Padamsi, and he cast me in a small role in a play he did, and I so impressed him in that role, he cast me as the lead in the next one. So, and Tughlaq was Girish Karnad's first play in English, and it was an absolutely brilliant play, and it worked because of that. Although a lot of cynics said the play succeeded because of my butt. Because the opening scene was one where I was standing with my arms out back to the audience with top light on me, looking completely naked, and then royal courtiers come and dress me. Of course, I wasn't completely naked. I had a langot, but that was completely invisible in the top light. So the shock of seeing a naked man on stage, everyone go, oh my God. And that got people talking about me. So it certainly established me as a name in Bombay theatre, and its success then consolidated that, which then in turn led to film offers, etc. But Alec was a remarkably creative man, and even though many of his campaigns were legendary in advertising, his real love was theatre, and he was a very complex man, because it's not as though he had a blinding vision of how a scene should be. He would try the scene one way, he would try it another way. He kept trying different ways to do a scene, which is very exhausting for the actor, because you have to rethink your parameters each time you're doing a scene. Now do it laughing, now do it crying, now do it as if you got a broken your leg. You know, do scenes, and then he'd find the right way.
Yes.
He was one of the hardest working people that I knew. And I owe to Alec entirely the fact that I became a professional actor. And I've never stopped thanking him for it.
Oh, yes, but that's a shame. That's a shame. It's a pity that in India, theatre is supposed to be the minimum of all arts with the minimum resources. And while I go to Europe or watch Broadway theatre in New York, I mean, they are stupendous sets. I watched The Lion King, Chicago. I mean, they are like, it's like watching a movie on stage. But in India, somehow it is supposed to be the smallest of them.
But today, tickets for the West End are £250, which is 25,000 rupees a seat.
Yes.
You know, that's what pays for the sets. That's what pays for the actors. Here, you don't have those kind of budgets. You don't have those kind of tickets. You don't have that kind of audience that can pay that much to make acting in the theatre lucrative enough to rival film or television.
Yeah.
It's a pity. It's a pity. I wish I could do more.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now moving on to your escapades. I mean, you were this restless soul who found solace sometime in Europe, then in America, then back to India. You did around 60 films in India. You've done so many productions in Europe, in America. In fact, The Bold and the Beautiful, and for a year or so, you did Bold and the Beautiful. I think I remember you. I was very small, very young at that age. But you did it for a year. Then, of course, Sandokan and so many other mini series and films and productions that you've done. Before I come to talking about it in detail, tell me all of these travels, the artistic travel you did and the spiritual travel you did, Western world and Eastern and all this, it does give you a lot of confidence, gives you a lot of adventure, it gives you a lot of exposure, good contacts, friends. What does it take away from you?
You're right. It gives you a lot. It gives you a lot of glory. It gives you a lot of experience. You see some wonderful places, meet some wonderful people, play some wonderful roles. What does it take away basically is a sense of rootedness. You lose that. A sense of security. You lose that because this is the most insecure business in the world. Even the most successful star in the world is afraid that his next film will fail. And then he's afraid the next film also beyond that might fail. So people are either very afraid of losing what they have, or they're unhappy because they haven't got what they want. And you're always aspiring for a step up the ladder, a bigger film, a better role, more recognition, more fame, more money. You're always wanting. And that sense of wanting and that sense of irregularity of income and employment removes from you a lot of stability. And therefore you have to have inner sources of strength to create your own routines, have your own shell to retreat into, remain strong, even though everything around you is constantly changing. There's no 2 days that are ever alike in the life of an actor, especially if you're working across 3 continents and trying to make a career on each.
That's true. And now that you watch, Priyanka Chopra did it well in the West, Om Puri, Anupam Kher, lots of actors, Ali Fazal, lots of young actors have made it quite big, and you did it in the 70s. Do you think you are a 25-year-old right now? This time is so good with the social media and world getting shrinking to a smaller entity now, and West being more open to having these Indian, Pakistani, or Eastern faces as their lead actors.
Yeah, Atika, you put your finger on it. Today, it is easier in one sense that roles are being written for Indian actors, Asian actors, actors that fit into what they call the label of diversity. In my time, my biggest challenge was they weren't doing that. And so I had to adjust to a reality where I was trying to get roles that were not being written. And how do you do that? So I had to expand my ambit from playing just the Indian to saying, no, I'll play anything that's foreign. So, for example, in my film with Michael Caine, I played a Tuareg tribesman. In The Bold and Beautiful, I played a Moroccan prince. It
Yeah.
was only in the James Bond film, Octopussy, that I actually played an Indian
Indian,
and
yeah.
a Sikh as well, which is what I am.
Yeah. What was his
So
name?
that was the only time I was actually cast correctly.
Govinda.
And this was a huge challenge. Otherwise, I played Germans, I played Russians, I played all kinds of foreign roles because in Hollywood, anything that doesn't sound American is foreign. So they blur the lines as to what a foreign actor can do. Foreign actor can play anything foreign. And I use that blind spot in Hollywood to
Yeah.
play a lot of foreign roles. And that's
Yeah.
what got me to survive a lot of the distance in that. But I must say that Italy is the country that gave me probably the most in terms of
Yeah.
projects, roles, and honor. I mean, I've been given the highest civilian honor by Italy. I've been
Knighted.
knighted by being made Cavaliere. And so Italy certainly has given me more than what most countries have given me in terms of recognition and honor. But America did give me that worldwide fan base, the Bond films and the fans of The Bold and Beautiful, not to mention many of the other television series I did. Highlander, Magnum PI, Dynasty, etc. So a lot of
Yeah.
other series and miniseries. Hollywood does have this wonderful international, worldwide reach that European cinema doesn't, and European television doesn't. So, in a sense, I took the best of each, but you're right, it does take a lot out of you because just the peace of mind that goes. Where should an actor be? If I want a career in three, where should I? Should I be in Bombay? Should I be in Rome? Should I be in Hollywood? You stay too long in one place, they forget you in the other place. This constant insecurity of not knowing where to be and when the next job will come and what you will do and how to match your expenses with your income, it takes away peace of mind.
Peace of mind, peace of mind. Tell me, Mr. Bedi, the most memorable character that I have in my mind of you, with reference to my exposure to Indian cinema, Hindi cinema, was Poon Bari Man. You know, in those days, a guy with light eyes had to be the villain for some reason. I don't know. The hero would always be black-eyed, black-haired, tall man, and villain was supposed to be, anybody with light eyes and brown hair was supposed to be the.
I love the way you categorize it.
Yeah, not so mainstream guy. But you were blessed. I mean, with looks like these, I think India did not see a Dharmendra or Amitabh or a Vinod Khanna kind of a figure in you. But I think you transcended boundaries because of this look, because of your light eyes. Who have you taken after your looks?
Probably more my mother. Although as I grow older, I look more like my father. But it's interesting because I was in the middle of my Hollywood period when I got a call to do Khoon Bhari Mang. I was shooting for Magnum PI in Hawaii, and I was sitting in my hotel room. It's the evening. I was watching this beautiful golden light on the sea, undulating, and the phone rang. No mobiles those days, so I picked up the hotel phone, and it was Rakesh Roshan from India. And I'd known Rakesh because I'd done a film with him earlier in my career. I used to call him Gudu, that's his pet name. The Gudu, how come you're calling me? He said, Kabir, I've got a film for you. I said, fantastic. Are all the actors on strike in India? Why are you calling me here? He said, no. He said, I've got a film where the hero turns into a villain. So no hero is willing to do this. And if I put a villain in the role, then the secret is out. You're the only one who can seem like a hero and turn into a villain and be believable in both. So I'll do it. So that's why I did the film. And it turned out to be my biggest hit in Hindi films. And of course, doing it with Rekha was amazing because she, at that time, had won the award for Umrao Jan, the national award. And I knew Rekha from my earliest days in Juhu. She used to be a neighbor of mine. She lived in one floor down from me. And I always had great respect for her. But in those years between being my neighbor in Juhu and the time I returned to shoot with her, she had gone from being an ugly duckling into a beautiful swan and wowed everyone and become a real iconic diva. So to be paired with her was the icing on the cake. I was absolutely thrilled.
I watched that video, Mr. Bedi, on YouTube where you're somewhere in Italy and you acknowledge that you are in a relationship with Parveen Babi, and the host asks you, "Oh, who's this lady with you?" And you tell him that, "Well, I'm in a relationship with her," and you would probably recognize her with the fact that she has been on the cover of Time magazine, and she's a very famous star back in India, and things like that. And she said, and you said, most importantly, she's a love of my life. You said something like, I'm I love her, something like that. And she blushed,
Right.
she blushed and she said, "Thank you." Tell me
Mhm.
about that moment. What made you go public with that relationship?
Well, I think our relationship was quite public even in India. The fact that I was having a relationship with Parveen Babi was not kept a secret. The Indian media knew about it. And when she came to me with me to Italy at the time of the success of Sandokan, she was at that time a bigger star than me
Yes.
in India. But of course, suddenly I was the big star in Italy, and um, she was seen just as my companion, not as a star, not as an independent working woman. And I've narrated this wonderful incident with Gina Laura Brigida in my book, where Gina invited us for dinner and called us to her home with the idea that she'd take us to a restaurant after that. When she called us home, from the moment Parveen and I stepped in and were introduced to her friends, Gina refused to speak to Parveen. She wouldn't speak to her. She ignored her. And I was watching the situation with great anxiety. Anyways, finished talking to her friends. We go to a restaurant in the middle of Rome, arrive there. Gina says, we sit on a wonderful table, alcoves, dance band is playing on the floor, old style, foxtrots, etc. And Gina says, "Come, let's dance." And I dance with Gina and think, hey, I'm dancing with Gina Laura Brigida, man. I mean, she was one of the biggest international stars of Italy at the time, she and Sophia Loren. So it's quite heady to be dancing with Gina Laura Brigida. And yet I knew she'd angered Parveen. So when we got back to the table, Parveen said, "Let us dance." So I got up with Parveen and started dancing with her. And as we started dancing, Parveen said, "I'm leaving." "You're leaving? You're leaving the floor, dance floor?" She says, "No, I'm leaving the restaurant." I said, "You can't do that. We're guests of Gina Laura Brigida. I said, "I know who she is. I don't care about her. She's not been nice to me. I'm leaving." I said, "You're putting me in an impossible situation. I can't walk out on Gina Laura Brigida in the middle of her dinner that she's throwing for me." She said, "You do what you like. I'm leaving." So these are the kind of dilemmas I faced. And at the end of it, I realized there was no way out. Parveen picked up her bag and I turned to Gina and said, "Gina, I'm sorry, but we have to leave." And she said, "No, but dinner's not served. It's not right. You cannot leave like this." I said, "Gina, I'm terribly sorry, but I have to leave," because I was caught in a dilemma of having to choose between the woman I loved and a star that I admired.
Yeah.
And whose guest I was. And if I stay with my woman, or do I leave my woman and stay with the star who's invited me?
Yeah.
And I chose to go with my woman because I loved her. And she had been insulted by Gina, and I could not stand by and let that happen.
That's so nice. God bless you for that act of yours. That is so gentlemanly. What a nice thing to do. Um, Mr. Bedi, now all of us have some skeletons in our closet. No matter how glamorous a life we may exhibit or just we come across as leading, but we do have our dark corners in the mind, in the heart, in our lives that we lead. Now, we all know that Parveen Babi she did have a problem of schizophrenia. Your son went through the same thing. In India also, the data says that every third person is depressed. They're suffering from a mental, just stress, and stress levels are very high. And then there are degrees in this sphere. What have you learned about mental health now that two key people in your life have suffered from schizophrenia, and how did that change you as a person for the rest of your life?
Mental health problems are tragic, but at the end of the day, they are mental health problems in the same way that there are physical and body health problems. Body health problems can also be dealt with through medicines or surgery or whatever. Mental health problems too can be treated. And I believe that today the treatments
Mm.
are much better than they were in those days.
Mm.
The biggest problem, mental health problem, is that the person who's afflicted does not want to admit it. That's the
Mm.
first barrier you have to cross. So, what it takes to convince that person.
Mm.
Secondly, even if they acknowledge the problem, it doesn't change the fact that they have the problem. Therefore, their behavior might be irrational, and the person who's the caretaker has to
Mm.
adjust. Now, I've
Yes.
explored in great depth what it took from my side to try to prevent the suicide of my son,
Mm.
um, and the aftermath of that. I'll only say that at the end of the day, whoever's afflicted with it is a human being. You have to see yourself as their protector. You have to let them know that they are loved,
Mm.
they're cared for, and that you want things to be set right for them. Again, I don't want to delve too much because I've talked about it, and it's not been an easy chapter to write, either the Parveen
Yeah.
chapter or my
Yeah.
son's chapter, because I have to revisit a lot of those incredible scenes, incredible emotions, incredible situations that I went through. But I think it's important to look back on those times, on those people with the compassion they deserve, even though it's very difficult at the time
Yeah.
to see it that way. I have a number of regrets in life, but I don't think how I dealt with Parveen's problem or my son's problem
Mm.
are among those regrets, because I think I truly did the best I could.
I think it's all for all parents to read this. This is
They
the
should,
sixth
because
chapter.
the afflicted and the caregiver are as much worthy of, or as much in need of understanding
Mm.
as anyone else.
Mr. Bedi, in India, while growing up, women have no idea what are the qualities in them that attract a man. For generations, women were told it's all about big eyes and long hair and how docile and submissive you are and how adaptable and flexible you are and how much are you able to kind of bend backwards to please your man, things like that. But when you grow up and you actually start interacting with your colleagues and other male members of your fraternity or your universe, they tell you you have always been lied to. This was never the truth. Now, you, by virtue of being a very handsome man all your life, a lot of women would have shown interest in you. You dated many of them. You got married to 4 women. All 4 women have been different in their own ways, yet similar in some ways. Tell me some misconceptions that women have about themselves when it comes to this relationship issues. Like, for example, what is it in women that most men get attracted to and like?
I think I wish I could give you an answer to this. The truth of the matter is that every single relationship is unique. Every single interaction is unique. Every single person is unique. So what happens when 2 people get together is totally unpredictable. What I can say is that men develop certain stereotypes about women in their minds, that she should be this, she should be desirable in this way, she should be like that, she should be like that. And women sometimes pander to that. And it doesn't always work out, because there's a saying which is pretty much in jest, thing which says, women marry men because they think they will change, and they don't. Men marry women thinking they won't change, and they do.
And they do.
So, everyone has a set of kind of expectations. And I think very often people don't think deeply enough about emotional decisions they make. And I think that's where all the problems begin. People make decisions for the wrong reasons. The other guy will get her. My mother likes her. It seems like how well do you really know a person before you get married? Surprisingly little is the answer in many cases. Strangely enough, the new modern dating apps and the marriage portals that are there are a strange way of going back to the arranged marriage system, where you actually know far more about the interests of a person, the priorities of a person, the demands of a person before you meet them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is something to be said for that, because A man buying a car will kick the tires, he'll check the mileage, he'll check 20,000 things. But fall in love with a woman, all those critical faculties seem to go out the window. And suddenly he's married for all the wrong reasons and he wonders why. So, and then the woman equally pays the price. So, two decisions, who you marry and how you make your living, you get those right, most of your problems in life are sorted. Or not sorted, at least they're minimized. Make those two wrong decisions, you'll have a rocky, tumultuous ride.
The next 7 to 8 years at least, yeah. And
Talking
about you individually, what drew you towards the 4 women in your life that you tied the knot with?
Very different women for very different reasons. Some deep, some profound. I think given the time we have, I really don't think I can really get into that, except to say that each woman in her time fulfilled a very special need in me. With Protima, it was the sense of liberation, the sense of being a bohemian, the sense of being a hellraiser, wanting to herald a whole new age in India. With Parveen, it was actually the need for fidelity, the need for deep love, the need for caring. And all those things. Michelle, who I married in America, had her own place. She was a healer. She was psychic. Nikki had her own vivacity, and we were doing Othello together. She was my Desdemona. We got together, and Parveen has been a revelation to me because we've been together now for 15 years, and it's been a very deeply satisfying relationship. So I've always believed in marriage. That's why I kept getting married. Otherwise, why wouldn't I stay footloose and fancy free? Always hoping to share my life with the woman that I love, and I found that in Parveen. And she's made it worth the wait, as it were. I've enjoyed being with her, and I'm enjoying it even now. So all I can say is that relationships are a very complex thing, and people should get into them with the greatest of care, because it's easy to get into a relationship for the wrong reasons and very difficult to get out in that situation.
Absolutely. And what do you have to say about your role as a father? Do you think you've been a successful father, a dutiful father, a person who did his duties well, now that we are around Father's Day?
Whenever you have a situation where parents are divorced, children suffer the most. I don't think I could give my children the time that I should have had I had a normal marriage. But given the situation, I think I gave as much as I could to my children. And I think the fact that they love me and care for me today is proof of that. My own father was a remarkable influence on me. He gave me the courage to be different. He showed me by his example that you can lead a life on your terms, even though it may not be the normal route. So fathers and mothers have different influences on their children. I think a father's influence is often underrated, but in my belief, it is as profound, because the fathers are sort of the rock of stability that give you a sense of safety when times are hard and difficult. And I've tried to be that. May I introduce you to Parveen?
Parveen is my friend. Mr. Bedi is like my inspiration, so I don't know how to put them on the same platform, but they are amazingly in love, touch wood. And Parveen, I have to ask you, I was in a very long conversation with him, and I know all of his viewpoints about women and you and things like that. How good a husband is he that kept you invested in this relationship for more than 15 years?
Yeah, it has been 15 years. You're absolutely right. I think I got him when he was well trained. By the time he got to me, really, he'd done it a few times by the time he got to me. But no, he's a wonderful human being. And what I like right now is the fact that there's that wonderful book of his, and you can see the kind of man that I know, right? The man that I fell in love with, not the headlines, not the rumors, not the gossip, but the man that I actually fell in love with. And I think that's wonderful, because everybody gets to see the real man that I fell in love with, not the actor, not this. So yeah, he is a very smart man, a very funny man, very caring, and he makes cups of tea. He makes the best cups of tea ever.
Yeah, I earn my brownie points by making cups of tea before our cook gets up in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that. But he makes my first cup of tea.
Yeah. But tell me, Parveen, so typically a woman would want to get into a relationship that culminates into marriage, and that is one surety that she needs to have before she invests her prime years and a good time, and that comes at a cost. You have to kind of take your professional life easy and invest more into your personal life. uh, you were just a couple for so many years, more than a decade, and then you both got married very recently. In your
Yeah.
mind, wasn't a risk that you were taking? I just a woman to woman talk.
No, not at all. I think when we met early in London and we went to Rome, I think that was the decision I made right then when I moved from London to Italy. And we had that lovely period together, and I knew I wasn't going anywhere else. I didn't
Mm.
want marriage. I didn't need marriage. I knew I had something very special with him. I also think he'd done it a few times. Let's try something a bit different.
Repeat offender.
Yes. That's what I used to say. I said, you're a bit of a repeat offender, Kabir. What we don't really, we don't need it. I certainly didn't. I really didn't. It was nice that he asked me to get married. He asked me to get married really early on, and I think that was wonderful. That act of being asked, the actual doing, and all of that did not matter at all. It was, it's just something innately very strong. And yeah, it worked for me. It certainly worked for me. I think it worked for you too.
It worked, but there came a point where I think it was important that we get married because,
He likes getting married.
no, apart from that, the fact of the matter is she saw for herself how people's attitudes towards her changed
Yeah.
immediately from the day she moved from being girlfriend to wife. Attitudes changed.
Yeah, they did.
And that is true of India, and that is true of the society in which we live. And I wanted her to have that respect. I wanted her to have that security. I wanted her to have that sense of being officially a part of my life.
We were married in every sense, right? So we had, like, we knew each other's families, we were there for each other's families, our friends are the same, our investments are the same. It's not like anything's, it was just a piece of paper, but we were married in every sense, apart from the outside world sense, I suppose. And I didn't think it mattered that much. Kabir would tell me, no, it's India, it really does matter here. And how much it mattered, I realized after we got married. I was quite surprised because there were people like us, relatively liberal, very modern, outwardly very modern, right? But when you scratch the surface, it's still quite.
He's a very traditional guy.
Yeah.
Pretty traditional. And tell me, Parveen has been quite instrumental in getting you to sit on that table and work on your book for not 1 year or 2 years, but like a multitude of years. Is that true?
Is that what you've
She's
been
the
telling them?
force behind
She
the
was
book
certainly
coming from
keen
the
that I
mind to the
get
book
this written. She was certainly keen I get this written, and once I decided, I was clear, and I decided, knew how I was going to write this book, and I sat down to do it. She was one that really protected me from all the distractions and made sure that I had the time and space of mind to do it, as well as the time and space physically to do it. And I say she is as much responsible for this book as I am. I certainly would have got it done in the time I did if it had not been for her.
Oh,
It might have taken me twice as long.
but I think he had stories that he had to tell, and I think that's very important. They got done, and if not now, then when? It was just the perfect time to get it done, and it's good that you get to hear his stories.
And lastly, I have to ask you: you were in love with the woman with the same name, and now you're married to a woman with the same name. In the initial years, how did she react?
Yeah, I did make the mistake of suggesting at one point that she might amend her name a bit, but that got a very tart response saying, "That's my name." I said, "Of course it is." Of course. I said, people might get a bit confused. She didn't see it in terms of, but it was fine. It was fine. In any case, I've got many other names for her. Ever since she introduced me to Twitter, I call her Tweety. Since she lays down the rules on a lot of things like table manners, I call her HQ, short for headquarters, etc. So there's many names other than the one she officially has.
No, it was very funny because I think we were coming to India at the time, right? And that's when you sort of mentioned it, that there was another Parveen in my life. Now, I've not brought up in India. I've not been that exposed, but it was like, why? It's my name. And it was just went. I thought it was just humor. It was actually just done in passing. But yeah. But the first headline I got when I came to India was another Parveen in Kabir's life. And I read that and I went, oh, this is what you meant. This is what you meant. So he was, I really just didn't understand that whole process.
No, I must say that she's a very firm head on her shoulders and completely your match, Mr. Bedi. She's a friend of mine too, so very dear to me. And you please keep her well, okay? Otherwise, you know what?
Tell her to keep me well.
Great. So you guys have a good time, and that's a great book there. Thank you so much for your time.
We love you.
Bye, Atika. Thank you for this lovely
Bye-bye.
interview.
Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, sweetie. Bye.
Bye, Parveen.